Hello and welcome to Bookspot. This time we'll continue our reading of Red Planet by Robert Heinlein. We have just discovered that the schoolmaster is in cahoots with the governor to prevent the annual migration of the colonists. Chapter 6, Flight. Jim shook him by the shoulder. Snap out of it and help me, I'm going to be late. Frank said softly, I wonder how he would like to tackle a winter in Charnax. Maybe he'd like to stay inside for 11 or 12 months at a time, or go outside when it's 100 below. Sure, sure, agreed Jim, but give me a hand. Frank turned suddenly and took down Jim's outdoor suit. He flung it at him, then took his own down and started climbing rapidly into it. Jim stared. Hey, what are you doing? I'm going with you. Huh? Think I'm going to sit here and do lessons when somebody's planning to trick my mother into being forced to last out a high latitude winter? My own mother? Mom's got a bad heart. It would kill her. He turned and started digging things out of the locker. Let's get moving. Jim hesitated. Then he said, Sure, Frank, but how about your plans? If you quit school now, you'll never be a rocket pilot. So what? This is more important. I can warn everybody of what's up just as well as two of us can. The matter is settled, I tell you. Okay, I just want to make sure you know your own mind. Let's go. Jim climbed into his own suit, zipped it up, tightened straps, and then started picking over his belongings. He was forced to throw away a large part as he wanted Willis to travel in his bag. He picked up Willis. Look, fella, he said, we're going home. I want you to ride inside here where it's nice and warm. Willis go for ride? Willis go for ride. But I want you to stay inside and not say one word until I take you out. Understand? Willis not talk? Willis not talk at all, not till Jim takes him out. Okay, Jim boy. Willis thought about it and added, Willis play music? No, not a sound, not a word, no music. Willis close up and stay closed up. Okay, Jim boy. Willis answered in aggrieved tones and promptly made a smooth ball of himself. Jim dropped him into the bag and zipped it. Come on, said Frank. Let's find Smitty, get our guns, and get going. The sun won't be up for nearly an hour. We'll have to risk it. Say, how much money have you got? Not much. Why? Our fare home, dope. Oh. Jim had been so preoccupied with other matters that he had not thought about the price of a ticket. The trip to the school had been free, of course, but they had no travel authorization for this trip. Cash would be required. They pooled resources. Not enough for one ticket, much less than enough for two. What'll we do? Asked Jim. We'll get it out of Smitty. How? We'll get it. Let's go. Don't forget your ice skates. Smythe roomed alone, a tribute to his winning personality. When they shook him, he wakened quickly and said, Very well, officer, I'll go quietly. Smitty, said Jim, we want our we want those packages. I'm closed for the night. Come back in the morning. We've got to have them now. Smythe got out of bed. There's an extra charge for night service, of course. He stood on his bunk, removed the grill from his air intake, reached far inside, and hauled out the wrapped guns. Jim and Frank tore off the wrappings and belted their guns on. Smythe watched them with raised eyebrows. Frank added, We've got to have some money. He named the amount. Why come to me? Because I know you've got it. So, and what do I get in return? A sweet smile? No. Frank got out his slide rule, a beautiful circular instrument with 21 scales. How much for that? 6 credits. Don't be silly. It cost my father 25. 8 then. I won't be able to get more than 10 for it. Take it as security for 15. 10 cash. I don't run a pawn shop. Jim's slide rule went for a smaller amount, then both their watches, followed by lesser items of lower prices. At last, they had nothing left to sell but their skates, and both boys refused the suggestion, although they were still 12 credits short of what they needed. You've just got to get to trust us for the rest, Smitty, Frank told him. Smythe studied the ceiling. Well, seeing what good customers you've been, I might add that I also collect autographs. Huh? I'll have both of yours on one IOU at 6% per month. Take it, said Jim. Finished, they started to leave. Smythe said, My crystal ball tells me that you gentlemen are about to fade away. How? Just walk out, Jim told him. It does not seem to have come to your attention that the front door is now locked at night. Our friend and mentor, Mr. Howe, unlocks it himself when he arrives in the morning. You're kidding. Go see for yourself. Frank tugged Jim's arm. Come on, we'll bust it down if we have to. Why do things the hard way? Inquired Smythe. Go out through the kitchen. You mean the back door's not locked? Demanded Frank. Oh, it's locked all right. Then quit making silly suggestions. I should be offended at that, Smythe answered, but I consider the source. While the back door is locked, it did not occur to Brother Howe to install a lock on the garbage dump. The garbage dump, exploded Jim. Take it or leave it. It's your only way to sneak out. We'll take it, decided Frank. Come on, Jim. Hold on, put in Smythe. One of you can operate the dump for the other, but who's going to do it for the second man? He's stuck. Oh, I see. Frank looked at him. You are. And what am I offered? Confound you, Smitty. How would you like a lump on your head? You've already taken us for everything but our eye teeth. Smythe shrugged. Did I refuse? After all, I told you about it. Very well, I'll chalk it up to overhead, goodwill, full measure advertising. Besides, I don't like to see my clients fall afoul of the law. They went quickly to the school's large kitchen. Smythe's cautious progress through the corridors showed long familiarity with casual disregard of rules. Once there, Smythe said, All right, who goes first? Jim eyed the dump with distaste. It was a metal cylinder, barrel-sized, laid on its side in the wall. It could be rotated on its main axis by means of a lever set in the wall. A large opening in it permitted refuse to be placed in it from inside the building, then removed from the outside without disturbing the pressurization of the building. The simplest sort of pressure lock. The interior showed ample signs of the use for which it was intended. I'll go first, he volunteered and settled his mask over his face. Wait a second, said Frank. He had been eyeing the stock of canned foods racked around the room. Now he dumped spare clothing from his bag and started replacing it with cans. Hurry up, Smith insisted. I want to get back to bed before the morning bell rings. Yes, why bother, Jim protested. We'll be home in a few hours. Just a hunch. Okay, I'm ready. Jim climbed into the dump, drawing up his knees and clutching his bag to his chest. The cylinder rotated around him. He felt a sudden drop in pressure and a bitter cold draft. Then he was picking himself up from the pavement of the alley behind the school. The cylinder creaked back to the loading position. In a moment, Frank landed beside him. Jim helped him up. Boy, are you a mess, he said, brushing at a bit of mashed potato that clung to his chum's suit. So are you, but there's no time to worry about it. Gee, but it's cold. It'll be warmer soon. Let's go. The pink glow of the coming sun was already lighting the eastern sky, even though the air was still midnight cold. They hurried down the alley to the street in back of the school and along it to the right. This portion of the city was entirely terrestrial and could have been a city in Alaska or Norway, but beyond them, etched against the lightening sky, were the ancient towers of Syrtis Minor, denying the Earth-like appearance of the street. They came, as they had planned, to a tributary canal and sat down to put on their blades. They were racers, with 22-inch razor-like blades intended for speed alone. Jim finished first and lowered himself to the ice. Better hurry, he said. I almost froze my behind. You're telling me. This ice is almost too hard to take an edge. Frank joined him. They picked up their bags and set out. A few hundred yards away, the little waterway gave into the Grand Canal of the city. They turned into it and made speed for the scooter station. Despite the exercise, they were tingling with cold by the time they got to it. They went through the pressure door and inside. A single clerk was on duty there. He looked up and Frank went to him. Is there a scooter to South Colony today? In about 20 minutes, said the clerk. You want to ship those bags? No, we want tickets. Frank handed over their joint funds. Silently, the clerk attended to the transaction. Jim heaved a sigh of relief. Scooters to the colony did not run every day. The chance that they might have to keep out of sight for a day or more and then try to get away without encountering Howe had been eating at him. They took seats in the back of the station and waited. Presently, Jim said, Frank, is Dimos up? I didn't notice. Why? Maybe I can get a call through to home. No money. I'll put it through collect. He went to the booth opposite the clerk's desk. The clerk looked up but said nothing. Inside, he signaled the operator. Subconsciously, he had been worrying about getting word to his father ever since Willis had spilled the secret of the so-called non-migration policy. The screen lighted up, and a pleasant-appearing young woman with the fashionable striped hair appeared therein. "I'd like to call South Colony," he said. "No relay until later this morning," she informed him. "Would you like to record a delayed message?" He was stopped. Delayed messages were not accepted on a collect basis. "No, thank you. I'll try later," he fibbed and switched off. The clerk was tapping on the booth's door. "The driver is ready for you," he told him. Jim hurriedly settled his mask in place and followed Frank out through the pressure door. The driver was just closing the baggage compartment of the scooter. He took their tickets and the two boys got aboard. Again, they were the only passengers. They claimed the observation seats. 10 minutes later, tired of staring almost into a rising sun, Jim announced, "I'm sleepy. I think I'll go down." "I think I'll ask the driver to turn on the radio," said Frank. "Oh, the heck with that. We've both had a hard night. Come on." "Well, all right." They went into the lower compartment, found bunks, and crawled in. In a few minutes, they were both snoring. The scooter, leaving Syrtis Minor at sunrise, kept ahead of the daily thaw and did not have to lay over at Hesperidum. It continued south and reached Cinia about noon. So far advanced was the season there was no worry about the ice holding from Cinia south to Charax. Strymon Canal would not thaw again until the following spring. The driver was pleased to have kept his schedule. When Deimos rose toward the end of the morning's run, he relaxed and switched on his radio. What he heard caused him to make a quick check of his passengers. They were still asleep. He decided not to do anything about it until he reached Cinia Station. On reaching there, he hurried inside. Jim and Frank were awakened by the scooter stopping, but did not get out. Presently, the driver came back and said, "Meal stop, everybody out." Frank answered, "We're not hungry." The driver looked disconcerted. "Better come in anyhow," he insisted. "It gets pretty cold in the car when she's standing still." "We don't mind." Frank was thinking he would dig a can of something out of his bag as soon as the driver had left. From supper time the night before until noon today seemed a long time to his stomach. "What's the trouble?" the driver continued. "Broke?" Something in their expressions caused him to continue, "I'll stake you to a sandwich each." Frank refused, but Jim interceded. "Don't be silly, Frank. Thank you, sir. We accept." George, the agent and factotum of Cinia Station, looked at them speculatively and served them sandwiches without comment. The driver bolted his food and was quickly through. When he got up, the boys did too. "Just take it easy," he advised them. "I've got 20-30 minutes work loading and checking." "Can't we help you?" asked Jim. "Nope, you'd just be in the way. I'll call you when I'm ready." "Well, thanks for the sandwich. Don't mention it." He went out. Less than 10 minutes later, there came faintly to their ears the sound of the scooter starting up. Frank looked startled and rushed to the traffic checking window. The car was already disappearing to the south. Frank turned to the agent. "Hey, he didn't wait for us." "Nope." "But he said he'd call us." "Yep." The agent resumed reading. But why?" insisted Frank. "He told us to wait." The agent put down his newspaper. "It's like this," he said. "Clem is a peaceable man, and he told me that he wasn't a cop. He said he would have no part in trying to arrest two strapping, able-bodied boys, both wearing guns." "What?" "That's what I said. And don't go fiddling around with those heaters. You'll notice I ain't wearing my gun. You can take the station apart for all of me." Jim had joined Frank at the counter. "What's this all about?" he asked. "You tell me. All I know is there's a call out to pick you up. You're charged with burglary, theft, truancy, destruction of company property, pretty near everything. Seems like you are a couple of desperate characters, though you don't look the part." "I see," said Frank slowly. "Well, what are you going to do about it?" "Nothing, nothing at all. Long about tomorrow morning, a special scooter will arrive, and I presume there will be force enough aboard her to subdue a couple of outlaws. In the meantime, do as you please. Go outside, wander around. When you get chilly, come back inside." He went back to his reading. "I see. Come along, Jim." They retreated to the far corner of the room for a war conference. The agent's attitude was easily understood. Cinia Station was almost literally 1,000 miles from anywhere. The station itself was the only human habitation against the deadly cold of night. Jim was almost in tears. I'm sorry, Frank. If I hadn't been so damned anxious to eat, this wouldn't have happened. Don't be tragic about it, Frank advised him. Can you imagine us shooting it out with a couple of innocent bystanders and hijacking the scooter? I can't. No, I guess you're right. Certainly I am. What we've got to decide is what to do next. I know one thing, I'm not going to let them drag me back to school. Neither am I. What's more important, we've got to get word to our folks about the deal that's being cooked up against them. Say, look, maybe we can phone now. Do you think he, Frank nodded toward the agent, would let us? Maybe, maybe not. We've still got our guns, and I can be pushed just so far. Jim got up and went to the agent. Any objection to us using the phone? The agent did not even glance up. Not a bit. Help yourself. Jim went into the booth. There was no local exchange. The instrument was simply a radio link to the relay station on the outer moon. A transparency announced that Deimos was above the horizon. Seeing this, Jim punched the call button and asked for linkage to South Colony. There was an unusually long delay. Then a sweetly impersonal voice announced, due to circumstances beyond our control, calls are not being accepted from Cinia Station to South Colony. Jim started to ask if Deimos were visible at South Colony, since he knew that line of sight was essential to radio transmission on Mars. Indeed, it was the only sort of radio transmission he was familiar with. But the relay station had switched off and made no answer when he punched the call button. He left the booth and told Frank about it. Sounds like Howe has fixed us, Frank commented. I don't believe there is a breakdown unless what? Unless there is more to it than that. Beecher may be rigging things to interfere with messages getting through until he's put over his scheme. Frank, we've got to get word to our folks. See here, I bet we could hole up with the Martians over at Cinia. After all, they offered us water, and suppose we could. Where does that get us? Let me finish. We can mail a letter from here, giving our folks all the details and getting them where we're hiding. Then we could wait for them to come and get us. Frank shook his head. If we mail a letter from here, old Frozen Face over there is bound to know it. Then, when the cops show up and we're gone, he turns it over to them. Instead of our folks getting it, it goes back to Howe and Beecher. You really think so? Nobody has any right to touch private mail. Don't be a little innocent. Howe didn't have any right to order us to give up our guns, but he did. No, Jim, we've got to carry this message ourselves. On the wall opposite them was a map of the area served by Cinia Station. Frank had been studying it idly while they talked. Suddenly he said, Jim, what's that new station south of Cinia? Huh? What do you mean? There. Frank pointed. Inked on the original map was a station on West Strymon, south of them. That, said Jim, that must be one of the shelters for the project. The grand plan of restoring oxygen to Mars called for setting up, the following spring, a string of processing plants in the desert between Cinia and Charax. Some of the shelters had already been completed in anticipation of the success of Atmosphere Plant Number 1 in Libya. Can't be much over 100 miles away. 110 maybe, Jim commented, looking at the scale. Frank got a faraway look in his eyes. I think I can skate that far before dark. Are you game? What? Are you crazy? We'd still be better than 700 miles from home. We can skate better than 200 miles a day, answered Frank. Aren't there more shelters? The map doesn't show any, Jim thought. I know they've finished more than one. I heard Dad talking about it. If we had to, we could skate all night and sleep in the daytime. That way we wouldn't freeze. I think you're kidding yourself. I saw a man once who was caught out at night. He was stiff as a board. All right, when do we start? Right now. They picked up their bags and headed for the door. The agent looked up and said, Going somewhere? For a walk. Might as well leave your bags, you'll be back. They did not answer, but went on out the door. 5 minutes later, they were skating south on West Strymon. Hey, Jim, what? Let's stop for a minute. I want to sling my bag. Just what I was thinking. Their travel bags unbalanced them and prevented proper arm motion and any real speed. But skating was a common form of locomotion. The bags had straps which permitted them to be slung as haversacks. Jim opened his before he put it on. Willis extended his eye stalks and looked at him reproachfully. Jim boy goes long time. Sorry, old fellow. Willis not talk. Willis can talk all he wants to now. Look, if I leave the bag open a little bit so that you can see, will you manage not to fall out? Willis want out. Can't do that. I'm going to take you for a fine ride. You won't fall out? Willis not fall out. Okay. He slung the bag and they set out again. They picked up speed. With fast ice, little air resistance, and the low Martian gravity, the speed of a skater on Mars is limited by his skill in stroking. Both of the boys were able. Willis let out a whee just as they settled down to putting miles behind them. The desert plateau between Cinia and Charax is higher than the Dead Sea bottom between Cinia and the equator. This drop is used to move the waters of the southern polar cap across the desert to the Great Green Belt near the equator. In midwinter, the southern ice cap reaches to Charax. The double canal of Strymon, which starts at Charax, is one of the principal discharge points for the solar cap when it melts in the spring. The boys were starting at the lower end of the canal's drop. The walls of the canal reached high above their heads. Furthermore, the water level, or ice level, was low because the season was late autumn. The water level would be much higher during spring flood. There was nothing to see but the banks of the canal converging ahead of them, the blue sky beyond, and the purple-black sky overhead. The sun was behind them and a bit west of the meridian. It was moving north toward northern summer solstice. Seasons do not lag on Mars as much as they do on Earth. There are no oceans to hold the heat, and the only flywheel of the climate is the freezing and melting of the polar caps. With nothing to see, the boys concentrated on skating, heads down and shoulders swinging. After many miles of monotonous speed, Jim grew careless. The toe of his right runner caught on some minor obstruction in the ice. He went down. His suit saved him from ice burns, and he knew how to fall safely, but Willis popped out of his bag like a cork from a bottle. The bouncer, true to instinct, hauled in all excrescences at once. He hit as a ball and rolled. He traveled over the ice for several hundred yards. Frank threw himself into a hockey stop as soon as he saw Jim tumble. He stopped in a shower of ice particles and went back to help Jim up. You all right? Sure. Where's Willis? They skated on and recovered the bouncer, who was now standing on his tiny legs and waiting for them. Whoopee! Yelled Willis as they came up. Do it again! Not if I can help it, Jim assured him and stuffed him back in the bag. Say, Frank, how long have we been traveling? Not over 3 hours, Jim decided after a glance at the sun. Wish I had my watch, complained Jim. We don't want to overrun the shelter. Oh, we won't come on it for another couple of hours at least. But what's to keep us from passing right by it? We can't see over these banks. Want to turn around and go back? No, then quit worrying. Jim shut up but continued to worry. Perhaps that was why he noticed the only indication of the shelter when they came to it, for Frank skated on past it. It was merely a ramp down the bank. There were such ramps every few miles, as ancient as the canals themselves, but this one had set above it on an overhanging beam as if to support a hoist. Jim spotted it as terrestrial workmanship. He stopped. Frank skated on ahead, noticing presently that Jim was not following him, and came back. What's up? He called out. I think this is it. Could be. They removed their skates and climbed the ramp. At the top, set back a short distance from the bank, was one of the bubble-shaped buildings which are the sign anywhere on Mars of the aliens from Earth. Beyond it, a foundation had been started for the reducing plant. Jim heaved a big sigh. Frank nodded and said, just about where we expected it to be. And none too soon, added Jim. The sun was close to the western horizon and dropping closer as they approached. And we'll find out what it's like to stay outdoors on Mars at night in what amounts to a bus stop. More next time.